Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining me today because what we're about to talk about is something that's hitting millions of American households, right where it hurts the most: their wallets, their grocery bills, their rent payments, and their ability to just get through the month without falling further behind. Right now, behind the scenes, there is real concern inside the White House. And that concern is not theoretical, it's not academic, it's not political spin. It's rooted in a simple, uncomfortable truth. A huge portion of the American people do not have the money they need to cover basic living expenses. They're struggling to pay bills, they're cutting back on food, they're skipping medical care, and they're watching prices stay stubbornly high while their paychecks and savings just don't stretch far enough anymore. This is the backdrop for everything we're seeing unfold right now, and it's why the conversation around relief checks, tariff dividends, tax refunds, and targeted financial help has become so intense. Republicans are increasingly saying that more needs to be done, and President Trump has been especially vocal about this, going so far as to float the idea and at times strongly suggest that Americans could receive what he has called a tariff dividend check. For many people, that idea has become a lifeline, a source of hope, and for some, an expectation, because it didn't come from internet rumors or social media speculation. It came directly from the White House itself.
But at the same time, there's a growing warning coming from economists, analysts, and even members of Trump's own party. And that warning is summed up in one phrase that's starting to circulate more and more. The sugar high will be short-lived. The big bet on tax refunds and short-term relief might not pay off in the long run, and that's where things get complicated, because over the past several months, Americans were told something very specific. They were told that this year's tax refunds would be larger. They were told that almost everyone would see more money coming back from the IRS, and that this was thanks to what was repeatedly described as a big, beautiful bill. For a while, that message stuck. People planned around it. Some families counted on that extra refund to catch up on rent, to pay down credit cards, to fix a car, or simply to build a small emergency cushion. And now, as tax refunds are actually being issued, the story is starting to fracture. Republicans are acknowledging that yes, some people are receiving larger refunds, but not everyone is. In fact, a significant number of Americans are seeing refunds that are only slightly higher, unchanged, or in some cases even lower than expected. That's a political problem heading into the midterm elections, because these refunds are hitting bank accounts right now. The IRS is issuing them as we speak, but here's the issue that strategists are worried about. 6 months from now, most people will barely remember the exact amount of their tax refund. What they will remember is whether their rent is still high, whether groceries are still expensive, whether insurance premiums keep going up, and whether it still feels unaffordable just to live a normal life. And on that front, prices remain high, despite claims of progress. This tension came into sharp focus during a recent NBC News exclusive interview where President Trump sat down with Tom Lamas. It was a wide-ranging conversation, but the part that caught everyone's attention was when tariffs, inflation, and the idea of rebate checks all came together. Trump made the case that tariffs are bringing in tremendous amounts of money, pointing to billions of dollars being collected and even referencing a $12 billion payout to farmers who were hurt by trade disputes. He emphasized that tariff revenue is massive, claiming hundreds of billions are flowing in. At the same time, the interviewer pressed him on the reality Americans are feeling every day. Yes, some prices have come down, but many remain stubbornly high. The question wasn't just about numbers on a chart, it was about expectations. Are Americans expecting prices to fall back to pre-pandemic levels? Is that realistic? Or is it simply too expensive to live in America now, regardless of policy wins and economic indicators? Before Trump even answered, there was an important point made that a lot of people don't like to hear, but need to hear. Expectations are incredibly high right now. Many Americans feel like the federal government is eventually going to step in and bail everyone out. The hard truth is that the government is not in a position to do that on a massive scale. The United States is carrying more than $30 trillion in debt.
Printing more money to solve every problem doesn't make those problems disappear. It often makes them worse by fueling more inflation and driving prices even higher. Trump responded by saying that the administration hasn't sold its economic success properly. He argued that prices have come down significantly, pointing to gasoline prices as a major example, claiming gas was recently seen at $1.99 a gallon compared to $4.50 during previous periods. He acknowledged that prices won't naturally return to exactly where they were during his first term, but insisted that inflation has been brought under control. He repeated a claim he's made many times, that he inherited the worst inflation in the history of the country, or at least the worst in decades, and that it has now been dramatically reduced. He pointed to inflation figures over the last 3 months, saying they were around 1.2%, and contrasted that with much higher numbers under the Biden administration. Whether you agree with his framing or not, the message he's pushing is clear. The inflation crisis was inherited, and the current administration believes it has largely fixed it. Then came the moment that really mattered to millions of viewers. The interviewer asked directly about the idea of $2,000 rebate checks funded by tariff revenue. Who would get them, and when would they happen? Trump didn't shut the idea down. Instead, he said he was looking at it very seriously. He emphasized that tariff revenue is coming in at enormous levels and suggested that this gave him unique flexibility. When pressed further on whether he could promise Americans would get those checks, Trump said yes, he could, though he also admitted he hadn't made a final commitment yet. He referenced a recent payout of $1,776 to military personnel, a symbolic number tied to American history, explaining that it was a way of taking care of the military and showing appreciation. Then he dropped the line that sent shockwaves through the conversation. He said he may be doing something similar for the entire population. That single statement reignited expectations overnight. Social media lit up, headlines exploded. For many people who are barely scraping by, the idea that a $2,000 check might be coming felt like a lifeline. But here's where reality starts to crash into hope. The United States simply does not have enough money, even with tariff revenue, to give every single American a $2,000 tariff dividend check. The math doesn't work. The cost would be astronomical, and it would blow a massive hole in the federal budget. What insiders and experts are now saying is that the more likely path is targeted relief. We've already seen a preview of this approach with the $1,176 payments to military personnel. That wasn't universal, it was specific, it was targeted, and it sent a political message as much as a financial one. According to experts and White House aides, the administration is exploring multiple forms of relief, but they are not designed to go to everyone equally. There's also a strategic element at play. If Republicans believe they are on track to perform strongly in the next election cycle, particularly in the House and Senate, there may be less urgency to roll out a massive relief program in the summer of 2026. Instead, the promise of a $2,000 tariff dividend check could remain just that, a promise, something dangled in front of voters as a reason to stick with the party and stay patient. Meanwhile, the political fight between Republicans and Democrats is intensifying. They are clashing over issues like ICE, DHS funding, immigration enforcement, and broader national security concerns. These are serious debates, but for most Americans, the question remains painfully simple. Who is actually going to make my life more affordable? Who is going to help me pay for food, medicine, housing, and utilities? On that front, the Trump administration has started to roll out smaller, more targeted initiatives. One example that's already been unveiled is the Trump RX plan. Under this plan, certain prescription medications could be purchased at significantly lower prices if Americans go through the president's prescription program rather than traditional pharmacies, hospitals, clinics, or even large online retailers. For older Americans and those with chronic health conditions, this could represent meaningful relief, even if it doesn't come in the form of a check. So where does that leave us right now? The big question everyone keeps asking is whether money is coming to the American people. And if so, who exactly will receive it? President Trump has made it clear that providing relief was a promise he made, and that he is still actively looking into it. He hasn't committed to a universal payout, but he hasn't ruled out significant action either. What we're hearing from White House aides is that universal $2,000 checks for every American are extremely unlikely. However, targeted $2,000 checks for certain lower-income households are absolutely on the table. Relief for older Americans through lower prescription costs is very much part of the plan. And at the same time, discussions are happening around additional relief for investors, millionaires, and billionaires, potentially through changes to capital gains taxes or other financial mechanisms. That's the reality of targeted relief. Different groups receive different forms of help based on political priorities, economic impact, and electoral strategy. It's not one size fits all, and it never really has been. As frustrating as that is for people who are struggling, it's how these decisions are typically made in Washington. As soon as we get clearer details on what these relief measures will look like, who qualifies, and when anything might actually roll out, I'll make sure to bring you all the latest updates and break them down in plain language. For now, this is where things stand. There is real concern at the top, real pressure from voters, real debate within the Republican Party, and real uncertainty about what comes next. Thank you all for watching and sticking with me through this deep dive. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to support the channel, and I'll see you in the next update as soon as more news drops.